I'm Andrea, I'm the town clerk, and my primary function in elections is absentee ballots. The applications are primarily issued through my office, although through the pandemic, the Secretary of the State has taken a large role in that. But we receive the applications, we process the applications, we administer the ballots, and we hold the ballots when they are returned and keep them locked in a vault until it's time to turn them over to the registrars for counting.
Fantastic. Dotti, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, okay. I'm Dori. I'm the Democratic Registrar of Voters, and I've been in this job for more than 20 years. So I've seen many changes, but I haven't seen anything like this year. As registrars, there are two of us, a Democrat and a Republican, but although we are elected on a party basis, we are charged with making the elections fair for everyone. We are not really political offices. We are paid by the municipality, but we are governed mainly by the Secretary of the State. We take our orders from Denise Merrill. Our responsibility is to administer fair elections for all and to maintain the voter lists to ensure that all of those who are eligible to vote have the opportunity to do so. We are required to complete a certification process and to complete at least 8 hours of additional training each year. We are also required to appoint a deputy who will succeed us if we are unable to complete our 4-year term. So that's like a president and a vice president. If one of us were unable to work, our deputy would take over, and we are elected every 4 years with the president.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And Ryan?
My name's Ryan Murphy. I'm the Republican Registrar of Voters, and Dotti basically covered our duties, so I don't need to expound.
Well, I wanted you to talk, Ryan, about how we train the poll workers.
Oh, okay. So one of our other responsibilities while holding an election and making sure an election is run fair and responsibly, we do have to train our poll workers annually. So this year will obviously be different than other years when it comes to training our poll workers. But each time there's a November election, they do receive training. This time will be virtual, very much like this. But we do train our poll workers annually on the different changes in the laws and just the procedures.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm sort of admitting people as we do this. So, okay, so what I was hoping we could do is start off our discussion by talking about what happens in usual years as opposed to unusual years, so that people understand what happens behind the scenes and they understand what's different about this year, what will happen differently. I just wanted to start out, I wanted to know, is it correct that the rules for both in-person and absentee voting are set at the state level and then processed on the local level? So everything is through the secretary. Okay.
Absolutely. As Dotti said, we truly report to the Secretary of State. And she runs elections. She's in charge of election officials across the state.
And that includes your role as well, Andrea?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what does usually happen behind the scenes at the polls for the in-person voting? Who sets up, and this again is usual world, not unusual world, pre-COVID, who sets up the polling place, who's staffing it, and how are the in-person votes counted and certified?
Okay, so I'll take that question first. So in a normal election year, staffing is completed by myself and Dotti. We organize the staff. Each polling place has a moderator and assistant registrars. The moderators are certified moderators. A lot of our assistant registrars are actually certified moderators as well. So the moderator runs the day-to-day operation of the actual polling place, overseen by myself and Dotti. When it comes to setup of the polling place, excuse me. Wow. When it comes to setting up the polling places, that would be myself and Dotti, as well as a team of people we bring in to help set up the polling places. which are 99% of the time Huckleberry Hill School and Brookfield High School. On rare occasions, we have had to switch from the high school to center school, which creates a whole bunch of headaches in itself. But so myself and Dotti take care of that. When it comes to actual election day events, this year is no different than any other year, except there'll be less people at the polls and more people voting absentee. The true day-to-day operations of the polls are completely the same. And I know it's a question later, so I'll get into what we have done to safeguard people at that point. But the day-to-day operation of the polls are the same. So how votes are counted, as soon as you put your ballot through that machine, your vote is stored on a memory card. At the end of the night, we run what's a receipt tape out of that machine. And that tape, we print 4 copies. One is kept there. The results are read aloud as soon as we close the polls for anyone who's there to listen. And then that's brought back to the town hall where we compile the results through a statewide system. As for a November election, it's compiled through a statewide system where we enter how many votes each candidate got.
Okay. And are there any processes in place to ensure that the results aren't tampered with in any way, or is it all? There are people, witnesses, or
so.
Like that?
So our machines are tested before every vote. We run a test deck through our machines. We do publish when we run our test deck so that people can come and make sure. So what our test deck does is we know how many votes in the test deck each candidate has, and we're assuring that the machine is reading the ballots accurately.
Okay.
We can be randomly audited. Each election, towns are selected to be audited, at which point the state comes in and you run your ballots back through the machine to make sure that it was accurate. So we are part of that random audit process. We hope each time we're not selected because of the long process, but we are part of that process.
Okay, wonderful.
And I'd just like to add that there is a chain of custody as to who can be in possession of the machines and the ballots, both before and after the election.
And could you tell us what that chain of custody is?
Well, it's basically making, who has accompanied the ballots to the polls and who brings them back.
Okay. And are those people that you and Ryan hire and train?
Yeah.
Yes.
And when ballots are brought to the polling place, it has to be for an election, a Republican and Democrat who bring the ballots over. And when the ballots come out of the machine at the end of the night, they're put in a transfer case and sealed. And the seal numbers are marked down so that they can't be tampered with also.
Wonderful. Okay. Very good. And so I'd like to switch gears and talk about the absentee ballots now. And again, pre-COVID, normal world, how would someone have qualified for absentee balloting? How, we'll start with that. What were the qualifications, what were the things you needed to show in order to qualify?
So absentee balloting, you have to satisfy in a pre-COVID world, one of 5 requirements. You're out of town during voting hours. And that could mean simply that you are a shift worker and maybe you work in a hospital in New York and your shift will not allow you to be in Brookfield from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. To 8 p.m. You could be in Newtown. You're out of town during the poll hours. Your religion, there are some cases where religion may say today's a holy day, you can't vote today. So that's another reason. Your service as a military person would then qualify you to vote by absentee. Your illness would have you as an absentee, and your duties as a poll worker would qualify you to vote as absentee. So all our poll counters come in and they fill out their application before they go to the polls and they vote by absentee. Is that the 5? I got the armed forces, absence of town, illness, religious duties, and a physical disability. So perhaps you can't get to the polls because of your disability. That's another reason why.
Okay. And then how and when were absentee ballots counted? On election day, can they be counted before? Do you have to wait till the polls close? What were the rules pre-COVID on how they were counted?
So pre-COVID and post-COVID is exactly the same thing, and that's not a town clerk's responsibility. We do not count the ballots. We issue them and we store them and we keep them safe until it's time to turn them over to the registrars. And there are protocols in the transfer. I have to take an oath to someone who's administered to give oaths that I swear that I'm turning over a certain amount from a certain district, from a certain party if it's a primary. And then the registrars receive them, and they need to swear that they are receiving a certain amount from a certain district and a certain party if it's a primary. So they're sworn also. So there are checks and balances. I'm handing over 5 absentee ballots at this time. Date and time is included. And the registrars are saying, I received 5 ballots at 11:42 a.m. on this date. And those numbers should match what the total numbers are at the end of the day.
Okay. And I would like either Ryan or Dotti to talk about the counting of the absentee ballots. That'd be great.
Okay, the absentee ballots are turned over to us, and usually on a non-COVID
Yes, non-COVID.
election. Yeah, you want to talk about that? It would have to be after 10 a.m. because prior to COVID, if you were out of town and you thought you were going to not be back until Wednesday, but your meeting ended on Monday night and you're in town on Tuesday, technically you are supposed to come and get to the town clerk before 10 a.m. and take your ballot back. And the town clerk would give you a receipt that you withdrew your ballot, and you would be able to come to the polls and vote in person.
And you'd have to show that receipt.
You'd have to show that, yes.
Because
now that is changing with COVID. We're not exactly sure, Ryan, I don't know when we can start. Is it going to be, I think they're saying, I think it may depend on this session, but there has been talk about the after 5 p.m. on Monday, the ballots can be turned over to us.
Okay.
So that
come back to that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in
So,
the
yeah,
COVID
we'll get to
voting.
that. But so the
go.
ballots are, the ballots would be brought to the central counting location, which pre-COVID would be town hall. Now we are not able to be there. We're still kind of searching for a place because we would normally have about 6-7 people, and we are now going to have 25. And we have to socially distance and all of that. But the absentee counters would come in, be sworn in as elected officials, and there is an elaborate opening process that you open the outer envelopes, you count the outer envelopes, you open the inner envelopes, you count the inner envelopes, then you shuffle everything and you open the ballots and you lay the ballots out on the table. And the absentee counters work in teams of 2, a Democrat and a Republican, supervised by a moderator. And they will look at the ballot. Oh, this ballot looks like it's filled in all, the machine will be able to read all of these ovals. So they put it aside to be counted by machine. Oh, this person changed their mind. They put an X over one and they have another one. That one will be put aside to be decided by the 2 counters and the moderator, voter intent. And then that will be counted by hand. So actually, every absentee ballot is looked at by human eyes, and there is voter intent determined. Sometimes at the polls, people put things through, and it may go through the thing, but their intent may not have been that. So in some ways, the absentee ballots always kind of had a little edge there. Okay, and then after they've counted and opened and looked at all the ballots, then they go through the same machine that we use at the polls and follow the same process, you know, with the number of count. And then they have to store the outer envelopes separately from the inner envelopes and all of their worksheets. And that all gets sealed up until, after, everything is been settled. But they give us the count, and that goes into the count that Ryan mentioned that goes reported to the state through the EMS, the central station. Now, if perchance, and this has happened, they finish counting by 8. We reported at 8, but they might they are sworn not to go and tell people what that vote is. So there have been people in town who have known what the absentee count was, but are sworn not to tell anybody until after the election.
Okay.
So that is an integrity that we have had all along.
May I ask, do you know about what percentage or what percentage of absentee votes in general you receive that the voter intent cannot be determined and it has to be thrown out?
Very few.
Very few cannot be determined, the voter.
Great.
And sometimes, I think the inner envelope signature is very important too, because the inner envelope doesn't have to be sealed, but it has to be signed. Doesn't have to be dated, but it has to be signed. And if the inner envelope is not signed, that has to be rejected. Also, if somebody thinks they're going to save some postage and put 2 ballots in the inner envelope, they will look at the signature on the inner envelope or the signature on the outer envelope, who went the outer envelope. And the person whose name is on the outer envelope will be counted. The other person will be rejected. So it's very important that everybody use their own inner envelope and sign it.
Okay. We'll talk in
We
detail.
have very few of those.
Okay, we'll talk in detail a little later about what people need to do to ensure that their vote is counted on their absentee ballot. So we'll return to that. Just one more question on this issue, and it's for Andrea, about how many absentee ballots or percentage of the votes were absentee ballots in, say, the primary 4 years ago versus this year's primary, just so we have a sense of like how many do you usually get and how many are you expecting this year?
So going back to the records, about 4% of ballots issued for the 2016 primary were absentee ballots. For this primary that just passed in August, about 65% were absentee ballots. So it's an incredible shift, as Dotti had, or I think it was Dotti who mentioned earlier, or maybe it was Ryan, more people tend to go to the polls and less vote by absentee. And with the primary, that was a big shift. I don't suspect we're going to see more absentee for the election, but we are going to see a significant, tremendous increase from what they saw 4 years ago.
Okay. I just want to take a moment. A lot of people have joined us after I gave the introduction. So I just want to take 1 second to say, and for those of you who don't know, this is Andrea DiStephan. She's the town clerk of Brookfield. We also have Dori. She's the Democratic Registrar of Voters for Brookfield, and Ryan Murphy, who is the Republican Registrar of Voters. So they're the team that handled the elections in town. So we're very pleased to have them to speak with us tonight. And this is sort of I'm not sure if this question may be problematic, but because there's so much talk about voter fraud and fears of voter fraud happening, I just wanted to see if any of you felt there had been evidence of voter fraud in the past in Brookfield.
I will start. I've been here for November will be 3 years. So I've been a part of a state election, municipal election, referendums. And there has been no evidence of fraud on my time there.
Wonderful, thank you. Is that something that the registrars would see, maybe fraudulent registrations or anything of that nature, or ever see anything like that?
No.
We have not had anything like that in Brookfield.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Just want to, get that out there. Okay, so now the real reason everyone's here, the pandemic considerations and how things are going to be different this year. So now we understand a little better the details of how an election is actually run and how votes are actually counted. And now let's turn to how it's going to be different this year. So the first thing I'd like to touch on is the in-person voting. Basically, what are the safety precautions that you've taken to make sure that voters will be safe when they go to the polls? And what can people expect to be different this time?
Okay, so our protocols are going to remain very much the same as they were for the primary. So we did get a good test run at the primary with a lower turnout, but a good test run nonetheless. So some of the things that you'll notice that were different if you didn't vote in the primary, when you do come in, we are going to limit the number of people in the building because we can't have the lines build up as long. So if there's a need to keep people outside until they're allowed in, we will. I don't see that being an issue because of the quantity of people voting absentee. So just there'll be less numbers. We do have the lines marked to keep people 6 feet apart. Masks are required while entering the building. We thought we may run into some issues with that at the primary, but we didn't run into any. So that was pleasing. When you hand in your license to get checked off on the thing, on the voter checklist, we did have plexiglass between you and the person taking your license. The major differences, and they're not that major, were that once you got your ballot, you were offered a Clorox wipe to wipe down your voting booth if you chose to. You also took your pen at that point. So usually the voting pens are in the voting booths already, but this time we took them out of the voting booths and put them next to your ballot. So when you got your ballot, you took your voting pen. You then, when you turned in your ballot in the tabulator, you turned in your voting pen, and they were wiped down with Clorox wipes before they were recycled back to be used again. So those are our major precautions. Again, just like anywhere else you go in any store you go to, social distancing is our number one concern. And if we can maintain social distancing and wear our masks, the safety at the polls is of little concern.
Okay. And masks are required.
Masks are required.
Definitely.
Okay. And if someone shows up without one, will you have a mask available for them?
Yes, we did have masks available for voters last time, but people have become so accustomed to having their mask. I don't believe we had to use any of them.
Oh, great. Okay, good. What are the safety guidelines that you relied on to make these changes? Is it a local public health official? Are they CDC guidelines, Secretary of State guidelines?
So all of the above.
The above.
We had going into the primary and now going into the election again, we have weekly calls with the Secretary of State's office. Every Wednesday, we're on a Zoom call with the Secretary of State. So it's about logistics as well as safety. The Secretary of State, in accordance with the CDC, put out some guidelines. And one of their major guidelines was the availability of absentees to people who are uncomfortable coming to the polls. We also, as a registrar team, met with the town health director prior to the primary to go over what we felt our protocol should be and to see if he thought they were sufficient and if we need to do anything else. And so his major guideline was the masks. The wiping down of the pens and the wiping down of the voter booth is something that myself and Dotti added extra to make people feel more comfortable. Right. Masks were his number one. If you speak to the town health director, he will tell you that masks are the most important thing when it comes to this virus.
Okay.
So we added some extra safety just to make people feel safe because we want people to feel safe when they come in. But that is, if we have masks on, the polls are safe.
Okay. Very good. Someone actually has a question that I'd like to bring to your attention. Can you bring your own pen to vote with?
Yes, it should. I'm going to tell you yes, because the machine should be able to read it. Because when you vote at home with an absentee ballot, you're using your own pen. Yes, you can bring your own pen. The machine will read it. If for whatever reason it didn't read it, we could issue you a new ballot. So yes, you could bring your own pen if that made you feel more comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe it reads red.
Yeah,
you couldn't
that's
use
the one.
Red pen.
But when people are voting home absentee, they're using their own pen. So
Right.
the machine will read, and the machine reads those. So.
Okay, great. Excellent question. Thank you. Okay, so I think that it's time to turn to the big question. And that, of course, is how the pandemic has affected absentee voting, and affected and changed absentee ballot voting. And I think we all want to know how it's going to work this year. And of course, I think we all know, because we've all received in the mail, that that COVID-19 concerns about COVID-19 have been added to the list of reasons why you can request an absentee ballot. So, so since we all know that, and we have a pretty good indication that there will be a lot more absentee ballots this year than in previous years, let's just start first with the basics. How do people get an absentee ballot?
Okay, so the first step is you must apply for one. We are not a state where we issue ballots to every registered voter. You have to apply for one. We have sent back a significant number of applications because they aren't complete. You do, I actually have my application here, and I know it's probably hard for you to see, but you've all probably received one if you're a registered voter. The Secretary of State sent one to all registered voters. It does say Town Clerk, but it did come from the Secretary of State. You're gonna fill out your application, and there are boxes that you need to check. We have a significant amount of people who did not check boxes, and that's necessary. And while I do know their intent is to vote absentee for some reason, I cannot take the liberty to check a box for them because they are signing under oath when they sign that. So we send it back in, and people will receive it. They just return it to us with their box checked. You have to sign your application, and then when that application comes back to us, people are taking great advantage of the ballot drop box that's outside, but most people are putting their ballots applications in the mail. We then go and we use the same exact system that the registrars use for their poll ballots. We mark that this registered voter has submitted an application, and we issue them a serial number. Every application gets a serial number, and your ballot will come to you. I brought all my supplies with me. Your ballot will come to you on October 2nd if you've already applied, with some stuff in your envelope, a reminder to use the drop box if you want to avoid the post office, instructions on how to vote, and the inner envelope that Dotti mentioned is so crucial to sign. You do not have to seal it, but you have to sign it. So when you, I even brought a sample ballot. Your ballot will also be in there, and this is a sample ballot for this year. We haven't received our ballots yet, and they go out on Friday, but they'll come. So your ballot is going to, you're going to complete your ballot. You're going to put it in your inner envelope. Your inner envelope is going to go in your serial numbered envelope. That same serial number is going to be on your application. So there is a whole trail of events. Your application matches your envelope. And that is all put into the same system that Dotti and Ryan use. But you are not counted as voted until you complete your ballot and return it to us. So we do have some people who have requested ballots, and they've called and expressed to us, I'm just requesting one. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I just want to be prepared. And that is absolutely okay. We may issue, so far we have about 3,000 applications. I suspect we're going to get a significant amount more than that. And my guess is, you know, there's a large number of those people are going to hold on to that ballot and wait and see what the numbers do, right? They want to go to the polls. They're a little uncertain. So they're going to hold on to their ballot. But if that ballot gets returned to me via mail, in person, which isn't really happening because we are close to the public right now, or by the drop box, I am going to mark your ballot as returned in the system. And that alerts the registrars that you have already voted.
Okay. So I have
Did I go way beyond that question? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's all important information. That's perfect. No problem at all. I just, there's a question, an important question that a participant has posed, and I would like to ask it. I'm just trying to think quickly if it's better to ask it a little bit later, but it is an important question. So let me just,
I think it fits. I saw the question that popped up on my screen, so I think it fits right now. And if we duplicate it, I think it's because I think it's that important.
Yeah,
But
right.
Yeah, it's very
I will answer because I
very
read the question because it popped up on my screen.
Sure.
So the question that came was, if you fill out an application and receive an absentee ballot, can you vote at the polls? Yes.
Right.
You are not marked off as voting absentee until that ballot is received back by the town clerk and then turned over to us as the registrars. So until that, you can absolutely go to the polls and vote with a regular ballot.
And what is the date by which the town clerk's office must receive the ballot back? Is it the day before
It is election day.
on
By
election?
8 p.m. closing.
Sorry, I
8
jumped over you.
PM.
Okay, so this was really something I wanted to cover later, which is how are you going to determine if someone does both? But I would like to hold that off until we talk a little bit more about voter fraud and ensuring that things like this don't happen. And it's very important to cover. So, but let's go through the details about how it's going to work, and then we'll get to that if that's okay. Our drop box is secure.
So we are the only office in the building who has keys to that. There are not duplicate keys. There is one set of keys. It is kept in a locked vault when I am not there. And I mean, I am not there. If I happen to not be there and accesses, one of my assistants will then be able to access the keys. And an assistant town clerk is sworn to the same exact duties as I am. They are kept during hours that we are not checking it in the locked vault, in a locked cabinet, in a locked vault. So the keys are very secure. Additionally, there is a camera on that Dropbox.
Okay.
So I feel very confident that the box is secure. The area in which you would insert your application or your ballot is it is slim. You can slide it in. So there is no ability to reach in and touch.
Okay. And the rules on voting and certifying, counting and certifying the absentee ballots are the same as they were. The process is the same as it has been in the past. Is that accurate? Like the way that it's going to be counted with two people, how
Absolutely.
you have the checks and balances of checking
Yes.
the outer ballot, the outer envelope, inner envelope, all of that is the same rule that you outlined earlier, Dotti, or is anything different about that?
No, nothing different.
Just you'll all be a little farther apart from each other. I think that's
Well, we may have a longer time to count. They haven't exactly, I don't think, decided yet. But for the primary, we had the ballots that came in by 8 o'clock on election day were counted that way, but they allowed for postmarks of election day. And I think it was Thursday, Ryan, that we counted again.
Mhm.
And then we had to certify to the state on Friday.
Okay.
And they've made that even longer now, so.
for the general election, it will be Friday.
We don't know yet.
You don't know yet. Okay. Someone did ask how is it that thousands of absentee ballots will be counted in one day? And I think that's the answer, that they won't be counted.
Yeah, they won't be.
You will not have election results on election day this year.
No,
Absentee
really no way.
Absentee ballots that come in on election day also have to be counted, and they will most likely not be counted till the next day.
That's right.
So you will not have election results until the end of the week this year. Because we're talking about it on a scale of Brookfield, and cities who have that many more absentee ballots are going to take that much longer to count. But any absentee ballot that comes in before election day should be able to be counted on election day, because that's why we're bringing in, usually for a presidential election, we would use about 6 to 8 absentee counters, and we're using 20 absentee counters this year.
So let me just be clear let me make sure everyone is clear on this. If the ballots are sent in and received earlier and they're there by election day, then those ones will likely be counted on election day.
Yes.
It's even accounting for the much larger number. It's the ones that come in on election day or the day or two after that are postmarked by the election day that's going to cause the delay?
Andrea, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there is no postmark rule on this one. The postmark rule was added to the primary because of the storm that preceded the primary.
Oh,
In the general election and as in normal elections, your absentee ballot has to be received by the town clerk by 8 p.m. on election day, unless that changes in this legislative session, which there's always a chance of. But as of right now,
It's before the Congress now.
your ballot has to be in by 8 p.m. on election day. The only reason there was an extension in the primary was because of the storm.
oh, okay. Okay. So if it's submitted the day before, it will likely be counted on election day. It's the ones submitted on election day that will cause the spillover, you think?
Yes.
Okay. And I just would like to take this opportunity to have one of you answer what is the difference between absentee ballots and mail-in voting?
So I'll take that. Mail-in voting is traditionally like a state like Colorado, where everybody is given a ballot if you're a registered voter. Absentee voting is you must qualify by one of those traditional 5 reasons that we mentioned earlier. And if you join later, it's because you're out of town, because of an illness, because of a disability, because of your religion, being a poll worker, or in the military. Those are the only reasons in Connecticut outside of COVID that you can vote by absentee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think it's a good time to turn now to the idea that you're going to be able to ensure that every vote is counted. Every vote that's properly cast is counted. And of course, people want to feel secure. People who don't usually vote by absentee ballot want to feel secure that it's going to be counted. And of course, there's an awful lot of talk about this issue and whether or not things will be counted appropriately. So I want to address this head on with you guys and discuss how it's going to work in Brookfield. So the big question was the one that we talked about. If someone shows up at a polling place and tries to vote, and then you receive at the end of that day their absentee ballot, how are you going to know? And are there going to be 2 votes cast by one person? So how is that, how are you dealing with that?
Well, I would say that the way I would express it is that it's whichever ballot we got first. Let's say that you came to the polls and you voted and we marked you off as voting in person. When we get the absentees, we check to see who has voted in person before it's submitted to the counters, like if it comes during election day. So if it comes in and we check that that person has already voted at the polls, that ballot would be rejected.
Okay.
We've never had that happen. I don't know what the reason would be. I don't know whether it would be a reason for election enforcement. I don't know.
So would there be any sort of enforcement? Would you consider that a flag of some sort of fraudulent behavior, or would you just say there must have been a mistake and just count it once and feel confident that they would only be counted once and that's sufficient?
Well, it would only be counted once, but what the consequences of that would be, I couldn't say right now. We do have a branch of the, I don't know if it's part of the Secretary of the State, but besides the Secretary of the State, there is an elections enforcement group, and that is their job, to find out things that have been done wrong at elections. Sometimes it's the procedures are misdone by the registrar or other elected officials, or sometimes it's a voter who tries to do something, but that would be their purview, and I don't know exactly how that's going to be handled.
Just to expound on Dotti, because I think this is probably one of the most important things that people are concerned about, is people voting twice. So we might as well answer the question twice.
Okay.
Because that is everyone's concern, and it's an understandable.
It is.
If we receive your ballot prior to election day, when the books go over, the book you get checked off on at the polling place gets sent over, you have an A next to your name. So the checkers know that you have already voted absentee. If your ballot comes in on election day, before it is counted, we check to make sure that you have not voted in person yet. And then they will mark your name with an A at that point. If you have not voted in person, they will manually go over to the voter checklist and mark your name with an A so that you cannot come in and vote again. So there is truly no way to be able to vote twice.
Okay.
I just know that's a lot of people's concern, so I figured I would expand on
Yeah.
it.
Someone asked, if someone mails in their ballot and they're not sure if it's received in time and they show up for in-person voting, I think that might be an explanation of why something like that might happen. But then you're saying that if they don't have the A, it means it wasn't received and they can vote in person.
Absolutely.
And then when you get to the ballot, when you receive the absentee ballot, you'll just disregard that ballot. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think Andrea can expand upon that some too, because you can track your absentee ballot.
Yeah.
I saw her nice Facebook
Okay,
post.
this is a whole series of questions on this. That's what we want to know. So basically, is there any, okay, let's see. First, let's just say for in-person, is there any way with in-person voting that someone could have their vote not counted? They would know on the spot, right? Because they put it in the machine and you will tell them immediately whether it has been counted or not?
Yes,
Okay.
the machine would reject it if for any reason it was not to be counted.
Okay, so they'll know there's no way that they're gonna go to the poll and not have that vote counted. That's not possible. Okay, so then with the absentee ballots, is there a way that someone can find out whether or not their ballot has been received?
Okay, so yes, there is. If you visit my website or the Secretary of State's website, even the Registrars website, the same exact link where you go to check your status. Are you registered? What party are you registered with? Where do I go to the polls? If you fill in all the information on that quick little link, it will also report to you the day your application was processed. And I don't want to speak on behalf of the Secretary of State. It may be a day's lag, right? But I played with it today. I entered my husband. I know my husband submitted his application. I checked on him. It told us the day that his application was processed. Okay. So you can go and find out, oh, look, they did receive my application. Fantastic. And then once ballots, it indicates actually that your ballot will be issued on October 2nd if you've already applied. And anything after that, your ballot will be issued within 48 hours after your application was received. So if you went to check on your application status and it said, oh, your application was processed on October 4th, you know that within 48 hours of that, your ballot is going to be stuck in the mail for you. And it's time to start looking out for it. I'm sorry. So that was the question on how you could check that. You can go to my website. I have links all over the place. On the left-hand side, there's information about the November election. On the right-hand side, there's information. In the middle, there's information. We even put that today. We put that link right on the main page, so it's even there. You don't even have to go and navigate towards my page. It's right there.
So these are the applications.
These are the applications, but it will also report your ballot status to know that your ballot's been issued and then that your ballot's been received if you returned it.
Okay.
The question on with absentee voting, how do I know my ballot was counted? Well, that gets a little trickier. As I've said, I don't want to speak as a counter because I'm not a counter. But I believe that, and Dotti and Ryan could certainly interject here, you will know if your application's received, you will know if your ballot was received, but I believe there would be no way to know if your ballot was counted if you didn't sign your envelope. There is going to be no way to track you didn't sign your envelope because it's designed to keep the privacy of your vote. So if you didn't sign your envelope, your ballot's not going to be counted, but I'm not going to know whose ballot that was.
Correct.
I actually want to talk about this more, but quickly, there's a question that I just wanted to address. When can you start once someone receives their ballot, when can they start dropping them off at City Hall? And what is the date that they can start dropping them off?
Immediately.
Immediately.
As soon as they get it.
They can get it, they can fill it out, and they can drop it right back. And
Right
they'll put that in the drop box. They don't bring it to you, correct? They put it in
So
the
right
drop
now, we just can't handle the we are closed to the public right now, but even if we were open, we could not handle, the town clerk's office couldn't handle the influx of applications we were receiving, plus our additional duties, right? So all the other things that keep us busy on a day-to-day basis don't go away because our absentee ballots have increased maybe 65%, just judging on the primary. So we are relying heavily on mail. I certainly encourage the use of the drop box. It will just avoid any postal delays. We go to that box, we go in a team. There's never less than 2 people at that box when we empty it. And you know it's going directly from your hands into that box into my hands.
The participant who asked that previous question asked about the Dropbox and whether or not it's secure. And I know we did talk about that, but I think it bears repeating one time quickly if you would say how it's secure.
Okay, so there's a camera on it. There's a security camera on it. It is bolted into the ground, and we never collect by ourselves. There's always another party with us when we collect. And my office is the only office that has keys. And the collectors are only, we may have one of the assistant people that we helped get us through this enormous amount of work, but they would never go without a town clerk or an assistant town clerk to collect those ballots.
Okay, wonderful.
Just to go back to the question about how early you can turn it in and when you can start, I think I speak for all 3 of us. Please turn them in as soon as you can for 2 reasons. 1, we don't want you to forget to turn it in. Secondly, while we can't start counting them most likely till election day, there's a lot of back office stuff that has to be done with them so that we make sure that every vote changes hands and is recorded accurately. So the more time we have to do that, not rushing the day before election when we're trying to set up the polls also, is the best solution.
I wanted to ask, we've already answered this, which is there any way someone can find out whether or not their ballot is being rejected when it's being counted? It sounds like it is not possible at that point to tell someone.
No. And one of the main reasons for that is we do have to shuffle them so that our counters don't know how you voted. So at that point, we wouldn't even know which ballot was yours.
Right, that makes perfect sense.
No, we cannot tell people if their ballot's rejected because we don't know whose ballot was. We know the number of ballots rejected, but not whose necessarily.
Okay.
So I think it's maybe a good time to talk about, maybe you can tell us some of the common mistakes that people may make on an absentee ballot that would cause their ballot not to be counted, or there to be any problem at all with the counting of it, and how they can avoid doing that. Like what should they not do?
Simplest answer, and then I'll let Dotti answer, but I'll give my simple answer first because she already touched on it once. Sign your inner envelope. That is the number 1 reason that ballots are rejected. If you sign your inner envelope, for the most part, there should not be a reason your ballot is not counted.
Okay.
Ryan, can I ask a question? They also have to put it, not seal it, but put it in the inner envelope.
Yes.
What happens if the ballot comes in? Sometimes I know that, it's obvious that maybe they're not inside.
Yes. Sign it and put it in the inner envelope.
Yes.
Think of the outer envelope as your mailing envelope and the inner envelope as your true ballot.
Your privacy protector maybe is a good
way
to think of that.
But
so
Dotti,
if someone puts their ballot in the outer one and skips the inner one,
their ballot will not be counted.
Rejected.
If they put it in but they don't sign the inner one, rejected.
Rejected.
What about
Those
if
are
it's
the
being
2 main reasons.
sealed or open? Does the inner one have to be sealed or anything? Like, is that a
Doesn't have to be sealed.
No.
It has to be signed, doesn't have to be dated. There is room for a date, but they don't have to put the date. But only put one ballot in each inner envelope.
Okay, so if it's it's a husband and wife or a couple who are voting together, don't put them in the same envelope.
No.
Everyone
They
has-
each get an outer and an inner, use both of them.
So I'll just show you your envelope that you're going to you're going to have your inner envelope in this envelope. This is identifying. This has your name on it,
Right.
serial number on it. You don't want your ballot in here. Nobody wants to open this and empty it out and know, oh my gosh, John Smith's ballot's in here. You want your ballot in your privacy envelope. Inside the envelope you're going to mail back to us.
And do you feel that, I haven't seen the ballots, do you feel that this is all very clear on the absentee ballot, that this is the process? Or do you feel that people need additional training and understanding what to do? Or is it clear? In your opinion, do you think it's clear?
I don't
think it's
count,
good.
but I think I could, when we go over the reports, you have a small percentage of rejection.
Very small, very small.
Okay, so it should be pretty clear to
But
people.
there's an instruction sheet in there too that is, I think is self-explanatory also.
I just want to make sure that everything is clearly there for people so that they know and they don't need some sort of additional source of information on how to handle their absentee ballot.
Yeah, just to go back to the identity there, I had said that we open the outer envelopes and the inner envelopes and then we separate them. So when we're going through the inner envelopes, we just see an envelope without a signature. So we have no idea whose ballot that was. We just reject it. It's been separated from its identifying envelope when it's rejected. So that maintains the privacy.
So, and Andrea or Dotti or Ryan, if someone has any sort of question when they get their ballot, is there someone they can talk to, or is that not allowed? Or, you know what I mean? Can they say, hey, I'm not sure, I crossed out my vote, I changed it, is an X okay? Is there someone they can ask those questions to, or are they on their own once they receive the ballot?
We have been taking calls all day long, just with the applications, and our goal is to help everybody. So if somebody has a question, we'll never advise you what to do. That would, impart my feelings on an election. But if you say to me, oh my gosh, and we do get these phone calls, I didn't mean to vote for John Smith, I meant to vote for Sally. We do assure them that the intent of the voter is what is clear. So if they run that through the machine and there's some kind of, wait, whoa, I can't handle this. As Dotti mentioned earlier, there is a second set of eyes on absentee votes. So as long as your intention is clear, you put a big X across, what you didn't mean to do, and you nicely circle in the bubble what you did. If your intention is clear, you are safe and counted.
And when it comes to questions, you can call either the registrar's office or the town clerk's office. And if the question is for the other office, we will get you to the right person.
Get you the right
So
person.
you don't need to try to figure out whose responsibility it is to answer your question. Call either of us and we will get you to the right person.
Okay. There is a question that I want to post to you. You guys can probably see it. And then we'll come back to just finish up a little bit about fraud. So if a college student is, I assume, in a town other than Brookfield, living somewhere else, what do they need to do to change their voting to be in that town rather than doing an absentee ballot in Brookfield? They have to change their voter registration?
College students have a choice. They can either vote in their college town, at which point they will be voting for the local elections in that city and state, or they can vote and maintain their Brookfield voting status while they're in school. Okay? It is their choice. They can't do both. They have to remember, though, that if they are truly interested in local government and want to participate in referendum, they must stay on the Brookfield list.
Okay.
Because you have to be a registered voter in Brookfield unless they own some property. But generally, they should be, if they want to stay involved in local elections, they can, and if that's their choice, stay on those rolls. The colleges, I don't know with the COVID if it's still the same, but everybody lines up looking, getting the kids when they come in, and usually the voter registration people are there trying to get people to register to vote. And I don't know, when we do our presentation at the high school, which we weren't able to do this year because of the COVID, we do explain to them that, there will be people at your college, but if you choose to register there, you will lose your Brookfield voting privileges. So it is their choice, but they have to make a choice.
Well, they will have to register to vote in the other town or
If
state.
that's where they wish to vote, yes.
Yep. And so then they will have to follow the rules for registering to vote in those places, when they have to register. Okay.
In a perfect world, that state will tell us that they've registered there so that we can remove them from our Brookfield rolls.
Yes. And then on a related note, are voting records ever cross-checked with other towns or states to ensure that college students aren't able to vote in both places? And it sounds like you're saying, no, it's not.
Well, we have a limited process. We do not have, Connecticut has our CVRS, which is a statewide registration system. If I move to Danbury and register to vote there, the registrars are able to steal me right out of Brookfield and put me in there, okay? But we don't have such a system nationwide. We do have a group of states which is sort of a coalition that we exchange information on people who have moved, people who have died, people who have registered. It's called ERIC. And we do that in the beginning of the year after the election in conjunction with our voter canvas, which is our statewide thing. We are required once a year to communicate with people whom we suspect have moved. And they have to call us, they have to tell us, yes, I'm still here, or no, I've moved. But if they don't respond, they become what we call inactive. We don't take them off the list, but if they come back to vote, they have to tell us that they still live there and that they haven't registered anywhere else. And we are running into reactivating people now who are trying to vote absentee, which is something that we normally don't have, because if you're requesting a ballot, that you're registered, but the inactive voters have to reactivate themselves before they can vote.
Now, if someone is an inactive voter and they come to the polls on election day and do in-person voting, can they reactivate at the polls?
Yes, they can at the polls.
Okay.
They have to go to our assistant registrar table, and the assistant registrar will verify that they're inactive, and they're probably inactive because they didn't return that form. The assistant will ask them, have you registered to vote anywhere else? And they swear that they haven't, so they fill out a new card and they are able to vote that day.
Okay. Is it a large percentage of voters in Brookfield that are in an inactive state, or is it a small number?
It depends, and Ryan, I think you kind of would agree with this, how accurate our canvas is. If we don't get a lot of people coming back with a fairly high volume election, then we know that we've kept our list pretty much cleaned up, that the people who moved have moved. But, if the canvas, for some reason or other, we don't find out, and that's what we're finding out with some of these mailings that the state have done. Nobody ever told us about these new addresses, that, then we would have more.
But our inactive list in Brookfield is relatively small.
Yeah, it's relatively small.
In numbers. It fluctuates because right after the canvas, our inactive list will grow. And then over time, those people will have registered in Bethel or Danbury or wherever they move to, and they'll come off our inactive list and become registered in their towns. But our inactive list is never very large.
So we are over the time that we said we would go. So I don't want to keep people hanging on too long. So to just my final question is, do you feel confident that this very unusual election year will go smoothly and without major issues in terms of votes being counted or, any sort of unsavory behavior in voting? Do you feel you can ensure election integrity for the town of Brookfield this year?
I can go first.
Go ahead, Ryan. You go.
100%. There will be no issues when it comes to voter integrity and voter fraud. We had a good trial run with a primary. A lot of people looked at the primary as a useless primary because the primaries had already, for all intensive purposes, been decided. But it was a good practice run for us.
Really good.
We will have hiccups along the way because we are having absentee ballots in numbers we've never seen before. There will be nothing that causes any issues with voter integrity or voter fraud. I'm 100% confident of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We don't have to, we will be 100% secure and our integrity will be good.
And I and Dotti and Ryan are in constant communication. If anything on any application sends up any kind of red flag at all, we are in constant communication. We are checking register cards. We are contacting people. We are doing our due diligence to make sure that this is very safe for everybody.
Wonderful. Well, the town's lucky to have the three of you running the election. So, is there anything else that any of you would like to add that wasn't covered or that you would like people to know?
Okay, this is something that we have to talk about, but we hope that we don't have to use too much. If by some chance you've been asleep for the last so many months and you wake up and decide that you're not registered to vote, we do have an election day registration process where if you are not registered to vote in Brookfield, but you live in Brookfield, you can come to Town Hall, register to vote at Town Hall, and vote at Town Hall. We hope we don't have a lot of people because we're hoping that we've gotten this word out and that, people will be registered and that we don't have to go through that process. But we did have about 200 the last presidential. So we're hoping, go ahead.
Can you tell everyone the last day to register?
October 29th is really the cutoff.
27th.
Yeah, I think it might have been the
27th or 29th. It's the Tuesday before. Is it the 27th?
I think it's the 27th.
Yeah, 27th. And we are in session that day. I don't know how we're going to do it with Town Hall being closed, but we will make arrangements for people to see people in person from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay. So if at all possible, people should do it by then and not on election day.
Or online.
Or
online. We can also do it online. Right. So.
Okay. Please do not register to vote on election day.
Yeah, it's not a good plan, but we have to mention it. It's the law.
And it's definitely October 27th.
October 27th. Okay.
And Ryan or Andrea, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think you have asked fantastic questions, and everybody who has submitted a question, I think they've been great. I feel that they were really reached on everything, and just please, I encourage you along the process, if you have additional questions, reach out to me, reach out to Dotti, reach out to Ryan. We are happy to answer questions.
Absolutely. We'd rather give the correct information and make sure that the correct information is out there.
That's a really excellent point, Ryan, especially with different states having different laws. and you're talking to your friend in one state. And so it's best to get your information from us.
And always refer to it as absentee voting because it's not mail-in voting.
Right.
So we've had a couple of people that wanted to say that you're all doing an amazing job and to thank you for what you're doing. So just wanted to let you know that you have an appreciative fellow townspeople. So
Well, thank you for this opportunity to get the information out.
Yes, thank you. We do appreciate it.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. The library is putting together some other voting related and election related programming. So stay tuned. We're doing our best to put together a Meet the Candidates panel for next week, believe it or not, for the state Senate and state representative seats that are being voted on in November. So do check out our website for updated information on that. We've also put together a voter information guide on our website too, which if after you've looked at the Andrea and the registrar and town clerk websites, of course, but you can check out ours as well. We're trying to do our part to help people as well. So, okay, that's it. Well, thank you all. We have recorded the presentation, and assuming it all came out okay, we'll try to make that available on the library website so people can look, refer back and see all of this good information. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.